Longest in modern U.S. history. We have Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation. Mitch, thanks for joining us here on Live Impact News. Appreciate your time tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. Obviously, a very important vote, and everyone who's been watching down very closely is happy to see a final resolution to it, and it will get, of course, the final finality once this vote does wrap up in the next few minutes and the bill ends up heading to President Trump.
Yeah, so I was kind of all over the place there, just because so much has happened, right, since the shutdown. And walk us through a little bit then what happened on the floor tonight and what this final vote tells us.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you listen to it, and most people really didn't have to listen to it because if you listen to a couple of speakers, one on both the Republican side and one on the Democratic side, you heard the rest of the arguments because as the joke goes, everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. And then they repeated some of the same points. Basically, Republicans are saying it's time to open up the government again. Let's get things back going, pay people who've been furloughed, operate services again, make sure that the flights are going to be running as normal. Whereas the Democrats were saying, hey, Republicans, why aren't you allowing us to have the extension of these Obamacare or Affordable Care Act healthcare subsidies? That's something that Americans need, and you aren't dealing with it. And that was the reason why they had withheld votes to have the government remain open in the first place. So after those all those arguments were said and done, the bill passed, I think, as everyone expected. Probably maybe a little bit of surprise that there were a handful of Democrats who said yes to the reopening and a handful of Republicans who said no. But there were enough Democratic yes votes to outweigh any Republican no votes, and certainly enough to push the bill over the finish line. Really, the main piece of this debate ended on the Senate side when 8 Democrats decided to, or those who caucus with Democrats decided to break with that caucus and go with the Republicans, because that was really where the stalemate was. If this had been just left to the House, we never would have seen a shutdown. There would have been a very close vote, but because Republicans have the majority and don't need to reach into any sort of supermajority, they would have been able to keep the government open with a very close vote, with Republicans holding a slight majority in the House. But since the Senate has the filibuster and Democrats were able to use that to try to get some leverage to get these Affordable Care Act health subsidies passed, even though they had been taken away from in the so-called one big beautiful bill, that was really what was keeping the government closed, was that the Democrats in the Senate figured we can make this demand and Republicans will cave. Republicans did not cave. And so eventually enough Democrats decided, well, this has gone on long enough. Let's get what we can. And what they did get was that there will be an up or down vote, at least on the Senate side, about whether to revive these tax credits. And presumably, if the deal goes forward as it was planned, people will be put on record either saying yes or no to these subsidies moving forward. One would have to guess that the vote will be no, because Republicans do have a majority in the Senate. But that will put them on record as voting no, and Democrats will certainly try to use that to their advantage when they head to the midterms next year. As for what happens next, of course, the House sends the bill as quickly as it can to President Trump. He will sign it when he has already signaled he's going to sign it, so he will sign it whenever he feels it's most advantageous to do so. The government will then reopen. And then it will be interesting to see what that means in terms of actually getting the government services restarted that had to shut down. It's not as if you flip the light switch and everything comes back on. I could tell you, following federal court cases fairly closely, there's one involving North Carolina where the lawyers from the government who were involved, the federal government who were involved, asked for the case to be put on hold because they were not allowed to take part in the case while the government was shut down. And they asked the federal judge in that case to say, once the federal government reopens, give them 2 weeks and then they'll be able to start again. Now, most government functions that have been shut down will be back much more quickly than that, but you do have to have that ramp up time. People who haven't known when the shutdown was going to end aren't immediately, as of now, 8:25 at night, automatically going to be back in the office and back at doing their work again. Some may be back on the job tomorrow. Some, though, it might take a little while to ramp things back up. So I'm guessing that it's going to take, now, especially since this was the longest shutdown we've ever seen, that it may take a little while to get everything back to normal.
Mitch, we talk about the Affordable Care Act, the subsidies that are expiring at the end of the year, and the 20 million potential Americans that could see their insurance premiums increase. The Senate vote, they got the promise of a vote in December, but no guarantee that it passes. Did the Democrats give away too much then this go round?
Well, certainly the critics of this deal on the Democratic side say they did. I mean, they basically were urging their members to stick with this plan and get the Republicans to cave. And that isn't what happened. You've seen ever since the Senate deal came out, lots of calls among the progressives really calling Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, on the carpet for his inability to keep the Democrats together on this issue. It remains to be seen. I think probably the best guess is that when voters head to the polls for the next time in a general election, which is about a year from now, this will be sort of in the distance. If anyone remembers it at all, they probably really won't factor this much into their decisions in November. So I don't know that it's going to have a major electoral impact one way or the other. But in terms of trying to get those subsidies passed, certainly it seems much less likely that that's going to happen now than it might have seemed while the government was shut down and it was unclear which side was going to break first. There is the promise, as you mentioned, and we've discussed a little bit, that there will be a vote on the Senate side, but there's no promise that that issue will pass. And Republicans, in allowing the subsidies to expire, have said, look, this was always designed to be temporary. These are incredibly expensive subsidies, and we're putting ourselves trillions of dollars in debt. This is the type of thing we can't allow to continue because it's not sustainable. So much within the federal government is unsustainable. And if something can't continue forever, eventually it's going to end. And they're saying this is something that was always designed to be temporary. It's time for it to end now. The Affordable Care Act was passed years ago, 3 presidential administrations ago. And so now it's time for it to end. Democrats, of course, are going to continue to make the call to do something about this. We heard, if you were listening to the debate, Hakeem Jeffries, the House leader for the Democrats, saying they're going to continue to push on this week, this month, next month, into next year. And he basically said the only way that this is going to end is that the Republicans change their mind, or that voters change their mind for them by knocking them out and putting the Democrats back in. I think most people who are watching the situation closely in terms of what comes up in the midterms are saying that the midterms, regardless of conditions that are going to be top of mind for voters when they head to the polls, would look at this as 2026, that is, as a good year for Democrats. You've got a new Republican administration, and usually when the White House changes hands, the first midterm after that takes place is bad for the party that's in power. So that would mean bad news for the Republicans, good news for the Democrats. If they have economic conditions that cause concerns for the American people, as we seem to see in the elections that just took place, that would also be good news for Democrats. And so it's entirely possible that a very closely split House that's now led by Republicans could flip back to the Democrats. Maybe a little bit less of a chance that the Senate goes back to Democrats, but certainly if they win at least one chamber, that means much less likelihood of Republicans getting much of what they wanted passed in the next 2 years of the Donald Trump administration. And you would probably see much more likelihood that the president would try to do more by executive action than he's already been doing.
Well, the bill goes now to the president's desk, and but this might end too, right? We only have funds until January 30th. So, are we going to be in the same place in a few weeks from now?
Well, certainly a threat. I mean, that is something that we have seen in the past, and certainly during the two Trump administrations, we've now seen the two longest shutdowns, one of over 30 days and now one of over 40 days. So once it happens once, it's likely that it could happen again. My guess is, though, that as you get closer and closer to an election, both sides are going to look at this and say, is it going to be worth our while? Did we see any sort of uptick or rise in support or decrease in support because of the last shutdown? Is it going to be more likely that people will remember a shutdown that takes place in January as opposed to one that took place in November? All of those political calculations are going to be taking place, but you can be certain that this at least is going to be a threat in the background when we get to the end of January.
And again, with air traffic control being kind of top of mind and the holiday travel rush just around the corner, again, people are concerned about when we're going to get back up to speed. You think this ramp up time is going to be relatively short?
Well, my guess is for the air traffic controller issue, I would think that certainly by the time people are traveling for Thanksgiving, that things would be back to normal. I don't know that it's going to happen within the next couple of days because no one has really known exactly when the shutdown was going to end. We got a sense once the Senate came up with its deal, so perhaps the folks who are in charge of the air traffic controllers have been making plans that, okay, if the House really does finish it on Wednesday and it gets to Donald Trump, when would we be able to get things back up to normal? So let's hope that they have been planning that. But my suspicion is that certainly by the time you see the heaviest planned traffic for the Thanksgiving holiday, that they would be back to normal. But that remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. And big picture, Mitch, what should Americans brace for now, entering 2026?
Well, I'm guessing you're going to see more political brinkmanship and gamesmanship. Of course, that always happens even more in an election year than it does in the off year. So they're going to continue to fight, the Democrats and Republicans, over their priorities. Because there is no 60 votes for either party in the Senate, that means that on that side, the minority party, which in this case is the Democrats, has more leverage and will have opportunity, as long as the filibuster is around, to be able to throw a monkey wrench into the system. We've heard President Trump call for ending the filibuster. I think Republicans, realizing how it has worked to their advantage when Democrats have been in charge, are a little bit reluctant to do that. So as long as that filibuster is in place, you're going to see a very difficult time for any Republican-only legislation to pass, and it becomes even more so, more difficult during an election year. And I think the partisan rhetoric that we're already seeing will certainly ramp up as both sides make their case to the American people.
Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation. Appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for weighing in, and the insight was great.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, the funding package bill has passed. It is passed the House. It is now heading to the president's desk, and it is expected that he signs that around 9:45 tonight. We'll bring that to you here on Live Impact News. For now.